Donald Trump had always prided himself on his vast empire, his wealth, and his golden-plated penthouses. But there was one estate, hidden from the public eye, that he rarely spoke of. Trump Manor, a grand yet eerie mansion in upstate New York. It had been a property he acquired years ago, though he never truly lived in it. Something about the place felt wrong. One night, after a sudden urge to revisit the property, he decided to spend the weekend alone at the mansion. His aides and security team were dismissed. He wanted to prove to himself that he was still fearless, the master of all things. The first evening was uneventful, though the air felt unnaturally cold. The golden chandeliers flickered, their glow uneasy, as if the house itself was disturbed by his presence. As he wandered through the grand hallways, his reflection in the massive mirrors seemed delayed, a step behind, smirking when he wasn't. By midnight, a strange tapping sound echoed from the walls, rhythmic and purposeful. At first, he dismissed it as old pipes, but the noise soon transformed into whispers. Faint, distant voices calling his name, mocking him. "Donald, Donald, your empire is crumbling." He laughed it off, yet unease settled deep within him. At 3 a.m., he woke to the sound of heavy footsteps pacing outside his bedroom. Grabbing a golden candelabra, he swung open the door. Nothing. Just an endless hallway stretching longer than he remembered. The walls appeared distorted, pulsating as if the house was breathing. Then he heard it, a voice, deep and guttural. "You built this empire on greed and vanity. Now it will consume you." A shadowy figure emerged from the darkness. It had his face, but twisted, grotesque. Its grin stretched too wide, its eyes hollow, reflecting an abyss of failed deals and broken promises. It reached out a hand, long fingers curling. "Come, let's negotiate." Panic surged. He ran, but the halls shifted, twisting into an endless labyrinth of gold and shadows. Portraits of himself lined the walls, their eyes bleeding black. His own voice taunted him from every direction, praises turned into jeers, cheers twisted into screams. Desperate, he found himself back in the grand foyer. The front door stood wide open, but outside was no longer the driveway. Just darkness. A swirling, endless void. The whispering voices rose into a crescendo, chanting his name in distorted mockery. He slammed the door shut, but when he turned around, the mansion was no longer the same. The ceiling stretched endlessly, the walls closed in, and standing before him was the grotesque doppelganger. "The deal is done, Donald," it whispered. Frightened beyond reason, he backed away, but the room expanded, pulling him into an unfamiliar corridor lined with gilded doors. Each door bore a title: Failed Casino, Trump University Scandal, Stormy Nights, The Apprentice Lies. He yanked one open in desperation and found himself inside a casino, but the slot machines bore his face, and every pull of the lever only made them chant, "Bankruptcy, bankruptcy, bankruptcy." He stumbled backward, heart hammering, and turned to run, only to find himself in a dark courtroom. The judge looked like him, older, disheveled, furious. The gavel slammed down. "You are sentenced to your own making." Suddenly, he was in a television studio, the audience filled with faceless people, laughing, clapping, but their mouths stretched unnaturally wide, their applause deafening. His doppelganger sat in his old spot, pointing at him with a knowing grin. "You're fired." He screamed, but no sound came out. His world collapsed inward, gold melting into shadows, halls crumbling, mirrors shattering. He saw himself in the reflections, but not as he was. Distorted, aged, desperate. Hands reached from the shards, clawing at him, dragging him into the abyss. The next morning, aides arrived to find the mansion silent, the doors locked from the inside. No sign of him, no trace of where he had gone. But the mirrors still carried his reflection, trapped forever in a house that had finally claimed its master. And if one listened closely, in the dead of night,